Things for which my father was frequently applauded was the way he would instruct those involved in trials, whether they were jurors or defendants, as to what was going on in a trial and what their rights and responsibilities were. One tribute to him after his death quoted him as saying, "I have always tried to make people understand what is going on in their case. If we are to serve our function of changing people's conduct, how are they going to be changed if they don't know what happened to them?" Why do I mention this? Because in some ways, historians are like jurors. Both jurors and historians are concerned with discovering the truth about the past. And to do their jobs effectively, both jurors and historians need to adhere to certain well-reasoned guidelines. In some ways, readers are in a similar position. Good readers critically judge the theses, arguments that are brought before them. Therefore, my intention in this essay is to offer readers some instructions as how to assess a historical case. Preliminary instructions. Understand the hypothesis that is presented. This seems so obvious that it shouldn't need to be stated. But because most readers are impatient, they sometimes make mental shortcuts. As a result, they miss important details that they might otherwise recognize. When readers don't fully understand a hypothesis, they are dealing with something other than what is actually proposed, and thus critiquing something other than what has actually been proposed. Therefore, before one can make a historical judgment about a hypothesis, one must understand what the hypothesis actually is. Be charitable when assessing a hypothesis or an argument. The principle of charity states that we should seek to maximize the soundness of others' arguments and truth of their claims by rendering them in the strongest way reasonable. When there are two or more possible ways to understand a hypothesis, we should understand it in the way that is most rational and persuasive within its context, all other things being equal. We should not resort to accusations of bias or short-sightedness before exhausting other options. We also need to keep in mind that even though an overall hypothesis may be incorrect, there may be points at which it is correct and helpful. The principle of charity is one of the first things one learns in philosophy, but the principle applies to other fields as well. Being charitable means that in seeking to understand a hypothesis, historians need to take it in its best possible light, recognizing that even if poorly stated, it may be fundamentally correct, or at least have a grain of truth in it. It also means that sometimes the historian needs to strengthen the argument or refine the hypothesis under consideration to address the fundamental issue properly. One idea that undergirds the principle of charity is that if one has dealt with the best argument for a position and found it wanting, then all the lesser expressions of it fail as well. Besides the obvious logical concern behind the principle of charity, there is also a hermeneutical end. Historians should focus on what is meant rather than merely upon what is said. Additionally, there is an ethical concern, namely the golden rule. We should treat others and their ideas as we want them to treat us and our ideas. Judge a hypothesis from start to finish. It's always tempting to skip to the end of the book. Historians must resist the temptation to peek at the conclusion of a historical argument, and if they agree with its conclusion, simply accept it without critically assessing the steps it takes and the reasoning employed to reach its conclusion. Nor should any historian